1 year of your salary probably isn't enough to wipe the dirt off my shoes. That cruel laughter echoed through the grand hall of Maison Étoilée, the most luxurious restaurant in Manhattan. That night, Chloe Summers, the tiny waitress, wasn't just doused in wine. She wasn't just fired in front of hundreds of wealthy, powerful guests. She had her dignity torn apart, her trust and fairness crushed to ashes. But at the very place where she was almost annihilated, Chloe quietly laid her trap, a trap no one could have foreseen. When the giant screens lit up, when every fake, arrogant face was exposed before the public, when the most powerful figures kneeled down begging for forgiveness, they finally realized they had made the greatest mistake of their lives by underestimating her. Tonight, Maison Étoilée wouldn't just descend into chaos. Tonight, Chloe Summers would rewrite the rules, and her story was just beginning. Maison Étoilée wasn't just a restaurant. It was a gold-plated empire, a lavish sanctuary where Manhattan's most powerful showcased their dominance through exquisite wines and impeccably tailored suits. Every marble tile beneath their feet, every shimmering crystal chandelier overhead, every soaring violin note was crafted to remind those who entered they stood under an invisible throne where injustice was law and mercy was a luxury. Amid that ocean of dazzling light, Chloe Summers existed silently. Her small hands clutched a silver tray so tightly that the cold bit into her skin like thorns. She kept her eyes glued to the polished floor, doing everything she could to become invisible. Her pristine white uniform clung to her slender frame, now stained with the kind of marks only those who endured daily contempt could recognize. On her back, on her sleeves, even in her downcast eyes, exhaustion, endurance, and the sting of humiliation seeped into every thread. The violin's dulcet notes and the clink of glasses floated through the air, but instead of beauty, they suffocated the space like a noose tightening around her neck. Chloe didn't need to look up to feel the stares. Contempt, judgment, pity of false and condescending. A sharp woman's voice sliced through the air, clear and cruel. Look at her. Has Maison sunk so low that they'd hire, that? The words hung in the air, sharp as needles digging into her skin. Chloe bit her lip, forcing herself to remain stoic. Her heart clenched painfully, but her face stayed a mask of blank professionalism. Another waiter brushed past her, nudging her shoulder hard enough that the tray wobbled. Chloe immediately tightened her grip and bowed her head slightly in apology, even though she had done nothing wrong. At Maison Étoilée, wrongness wasn't in your actions. It was in your existence. Here, people like Chloe, those without wealthy families, Rolex watches, or designer dresses were deemed inferior by default. Maison never had to say it out loud. It oozed from every glance, every smirk, every whispered mockery disguised as casual conversation. Chloe inhaled deeply, her muscles taut like overstrung wires. She knew she couldn't betray even the slightest flicker of anger. A frown, a glare, even a flash of hurt could be twisted into unprofessional behavior and become grounds for dismissal. Because at Maison Étoilée, servers could never be right. Only the guests were right, and money was the supreme law. Each step Chloe took felt like stepping on shards of her own dignity. She didn't know that tonight, this fateful night, would be the last time she'd have to bow. The place that demanded her submission would soon kneel before her. But at that moment, under the blinding lights and sneering whispers, Chloe Summers could only clutch the silver tray tighter and step into the storm waiting ahead. Table 7. The eye of power in Maison Étoilée's Grand Hall. Richard Langston, the self-proclaimed king of tech, lounged back in his chair, cigar lazily dangling between two fingers. The golden lighting caught his smirking lips, casting his face half in shadow. Chloe Summers approached, her silver tray trembling slightly in her hands. But no one noticed, no one but her. In the thick air scented with the cologne and expensive tobacco, Chloe's steps felt like wading through quicksand, each movement dragging her deeper into invisibility. She set the champagne tray on the table, bowing just low enough to satisfy Maison's rules, but not so low as to surrender the last shred of her pride. And then a soft, deliberate flick. Richard leaned in, almost casually, and knocked the wine glass from the tray. Champagne, cold as knives, splashed over Chloe's sleeve, soaking into the thin fabric and chilling her to the bone. A droplet fell from her wrist to the marble floor tap, The sound exploded in Chloe's mind like a starting gun. Richard chuckled, shaking his head as if sharing a private joke with his companions. Oh dear, looks like this little waitress is clumsier than a drunk kitten. Laughter burst out around the table, sharp, merciless. The music kept playing overhead, but beneath it, Chloe only heard one thing, the deafening rush of her own blood pounding in her ears. She stood frozen, not from the cold, but from the rage rising inside her. Wave after crashing wave, a droplet of champagne trickled down her hand, burning like acid. Chloe tightened her fingers around the tray until her knuckles turned white. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. I'm sorry, sir, Chloe said at last, her voice hoarse but steady. She bowed even lower, masking the fire blazing in her eyes. Outwardly, she submitted. Inwardly, amid the chaotic drum of her heart, something cracked. A tiny fracture, almost invisible. But from that crack, a flame began to burn. And when it grew large enough, no one in that room would be safe. Maison Etoile held his breath. Time seemed to slow, as if the air itself thickened around Chloe. She was carrying a silver tray full of petit four, tiny eclair, and macarons that sparkled under the golden lights like gems on display. Table 7 again. Richard Langston and his entourage sat there, wine glasses in hand, laughter still lingering from the spilled champagne. Chloe lowered her gaze, her steps steady, focused. She didn't look at them. She didn't need to. The trap had already been set, just a few steps from the table. As she carefully balanced the tray, a glittering Gucci heel slid out from beneath the tablecloth. No warning, no accident. Chloe had no time to react. She stumbled, a sharp lurch forward. The tray flipped from her hands, eclair and macarons scattering through the air like shrapnel from an explosion. The tray hit the marble floor with a brutal clang. Time froze. One heartbeat, one breath caught in her throat. Then, laughter, explosive, cruel. It echoed off the marble columns like gunfire. Someone whistled. Someone mimicked her fall. Richard clapped, delighted. Mason should consider hiring clowns next. What a show. Chloe lay sprawled among the ruins of the dessert tray, broken pastries clinging to her sleeves. Every eye in the room was on her, cold, amused, merciless, humiliated. Publicly, brutally, she clenched her fists, nails digging into her palms hard enough to draw blood. But she did not cry, not here, not in front of them. At that moment, in the wreckage of that twisted performance, Chloe Summers understood something. They didn't just want her to fall. They wanted her to break, to be shattered completely. And that was their fatal mistake. Because when you leave someone with nothing to lose, they become the most dangerous person in the room. Chloe struggled to her feet. Her body ached. Pastry crumbs clung to her uniform, her sleeves still soaked in cold wine. The scent of shame clung to her skin like smoke. No one helped her. No hand reached out. Only whispers. Only smirks. Only the soft, poisonous laughter of a room full of polished monsters. Chloe clenched her jaw and gathered the shattered tray. She bowed slightly, not out of submission, but out of strategy. Then she turned and walked toward the back hall, swallowed by shadow. Behind her, the music swelled again. The show went on, as if no one had ever fallen. The staff break room behind Mason's grand hall was dim, cold, and quiet. Chloe leaned against a brick wall, her breath ragged. Her hands still trembled. Then, footsteps, soft, hurried. Chloe, a whisper. It was Elena, a young new server, barely past training. She rushed to Chloe's side, eyes wide with concern. Are you okay? I saw everything. Chloe looked at her. Elena's eyes brimmed with sincerity. I know how to access the security footage, she whispered, glancing around nervously. We can prove you didn't do anything wrong. Those words, spoken so quietly, struck like a flare in the dark. Chloe stared at Elena. Her grip on the warp tray loosened. A chance, a weapon. For the first time that night, the fire in her chest didn't burn from humiliation. It burned from resolve. Help me, Chloe whispered, voice raw. Elena nodded quickly, her small hands squeezing Chloe's wrist. But as Chloe turned away, she didn't see. In the corner of the room, just beyond the low lights, Elena glanced toward the hallway. Her phone lit up in her palm. A message. Just sent. She took the bait. What's the next step? Chloe didn't know. The betrayal wasn't just from those who laughed as she fell. It came with soft smiles and hands that reached out at the exact moment you wanted to believe in kindness again. And as she stepped out of the shadows, Chloe Summers had no idea. Another blade was waiting, gleaming just beyond the light. Maison Etoile froze. All sounds seemed sucked out of the grand hall. Only one voice sliced through the heavy air, loud and merciless. Chloe Summers. She stopped in her tracks, her hand, still wet from spilled champagne, clenched the tray instinctively, her heart hammering against her ribs. Manager Davin stormed toward her, his face red with fury, his heavy steps like hammers against the marble floor. No explanations, no chances for defense, just the verdict hurled at her face. You have tarnished the image of Maison Etoile in front of our most distinguished guests. You are fired, effective immediately. The whispering began, a wicked symphony of gossip, fueled by cruelty. Phones were raised, cameras blinking, eager to capture every second of the execution. Chloe stood there, alone, under every stare, every smirk, under every judgmental glance hiding behind glittering glasses and polished suits. A single drop of champagne slid from her sleeve to the floor, tapped. The sound echoed in her head, deafening. She could bow, she could apologize, beg, even. It was what every crushed soul before her had done at Maison. But she didn't. Chloe inhaled deeply, lifted her chin, faced the roaring silence without flinching. Because Chloe Summers had realized something. When the powerful resort to public humiliation to destroy you, it only proves they are terrified. Step by step, she walked across the grand hall, through the gauntlet of stairs, through the field of shattered dreams. She didn't rush. She didn't falter. Each footfall sounded like a drumbeat of rebellion on the marble floor. Not the flight of a defeated servant, but the march of a survivor, a soldier, one who would return not with rage, but with something much colder, something much sharper. The heavy oak doors creaked open. Cold night air rushed into the grand hall, sweeping past the frozen, speechless crowd. Without looking back, Chloe Summers stepped into the night, leaving Maison Etoile, its gold, its lies, and its false glory to rot behind her. The doors of Maison Etoile closed behind her. The music, the laughter, the whispers, they all faded into a muffled hum, swallowed by the thickness of the Manhattan night. Chloe walked forward, each step steady, each breath a silent vow. Streetlights threw long shadows across the wet pavement. The city buzzed around her, oblivious to the quiet war just waged and won inside her heart. She tightened her coat against the chill, not against the cold of the air, but against the lingering cold of betrayal, of humiliation, of rage distilled into something purer, something far more dangerous. She stopped beneath an ancient oak tree outside Maison. The leaves rustled above her, whispering secrets. From her coat pocket, Chloe drew out an old phone, its screen cracked at the corner. Her fingers hovered for a second. Then, with a breath, she opened a hidden application. A gray icon blinked on the screen, a project she had been building quietly, patiently. During all those silent months at Maison, a tap, a confirmation, phase 1 activated. Somewhere unseen, tiny hidden devices, cameras tucked inside chandeliers, microphones embedded in walls, bugs sewn into floral arrangements stirred to life. Every arrogant whisper, every disdainful command, every cruel laugh was now being recorded, documented, archived, a tidal wave gathering strength, invisible, unstoppable. From the shadows, Chloe watched. The lights of Maison glowed warmly, its windows gleaming against the night. Inside, the powerful still danced, still drank, still laughed, oblivious, blind to the noose tightening around them. The gears of their own destruction were already turning, and Chloe Summers was the silent force behind it all. She smiled not with cruelty, but with the clarity of someone who had learned, sometimes you don't fight the monsters. You simply let them hang themselves with their own chains. Inside Maison Etoile, the music rose again, louder, more triumphant. No one spoke of Chloe Summers anymore. No one cared. As easily as wiping a stain off a silk tablecloth, they erased her existence from their golden world. Richard Langston leaned back in his chair, raising a champagne flute high above his head, laughing loudly. Mason has restored his dignity at last. The crowd joined in. A ripple of smirks and clinking glasses. Manager Davin weaved through the gathering, a drink in hand, his face flushed with alcohol and triumph. Here, he declared loudly, only those who know their place belong. The clinking of glasses rang out like the slam of a judge's gavel. Suits gleamed under the chandeliers. Silk gowns rustled like the petals of poisonous flowers blooming under artificial light. Tonight, Maison Etoile convinced itself it was invincible. They didn't know. Every smile, every toast, every whispered boast was being captured calmly, precisely by the hidden devices Chloe had planted. No act of cruelty, no whispered threat. No smirk of superiority would be left unseen. Richard pulled out his phone, snapping a selfie amid the crowd of revelers. "I'm posting it online," he laughed. "Let the world see that Maison stands taller than ever." Davin raised his glass, voice slurring. Victory must be celebrated. Victory, or the illusion of victory. No one noticed, no one cared. They mistook the blinding glow for strength, never realizing it was just the bright flash before the collapse. The night rolled on. Maison Etoile, drunk on its own arrogance, danced on the edge of its grave, and just then, a soft chime echoed in the building's email server. An invitation. No sender, no logos, just a cold, simple subject line. An invitation to the night of honors for those who believe they are invincible. The email blinked on the screen, simple, stark, no decorations, no fanfare, just a bold subject line. An invitation to the night of honors for the most distinguished guests of Maison Etoile. Davin squinted at the screen, tipsy and curious. "What's this?" Richard asked, still chuckling. The manager read the contents aloud. "We are honored to invite the most exceptional patrons to a special evening where loyalty, power, and success will be celebrated. Venue Maison Etoile. Time 8:00 p.m. tomorrow. Dress code, your finest. Come and claim your rightful place." Davin roared with laughter, slamming his glass onto the table. "See," he shouted, "Maison is still a legend." "Of course," Richard crowed. "A well-deserved tribute after all we've achieved." Not a shadow of doubt, not a whisper of suspicion. In their minds, Maison Etoile was untouchable, and tomorrow night would be yet another golden triumph. The invitation spread like wildfire through their circles. To every regular guest, to every power broker who had once sneered down at Chloe. The elite buzzed with excitement, rehearsing their grand entrances and sharpening their egos for another night under the chandeliers. No one knew that behind the polished language of the invitation, no spotlight waited for them. Only darkness, only judgment. Maison Etoile still shone like a beacon over Manhattan, but like a lighthouse from a forgotten, crumbling coast. It no longer guided ships to safety. It merely illuminated the wrecks about to come. Night fell. Manhattan glittered like a galaxy sprawled across the earth. Maison Etoile gleamed brighter than ever. A black gem rimmed in gold, standing tall in the city's heart. Outside, a line of limousines stretched down the boulevard. Familiar faces appeared: Richard Langston, Davin, and their powerful friends draped in tuxedos and gowns, dripping with self-satisfaction. Tonight, they believed, would be theirs. Their celebration, their coronation. They had no idea they were walking straight into the slaughterhouse. The grand doors swung open, bathing them in golden light. The string quartet played sweetly. Champagne sparkled in crystal flutes. The linen tablecloths were blinding white. Everything was perfect. Too perfect, yet no one noticed. Not even the faint whiff of something rotten beneath the polished marble floors. Chloe Summers was already inside, blending into the shadows under the sweeping staircase. Invisible. Watching, waiting. 8:00 p.m. sharp. The heavy doors of Maison Etoile swung shut. A soft, metallic click echoed through the vast hall. Someone glanced back, frowned, but the music continued. The drinks flowed. The laughter rose again. If anyone sensed that something was wrong, they drowned it in champagne. Slowly, subtly, the atmosphere shifted. The lights dimmed, not all at once, but enough that faces, so proud and laughing moments ago, paled under the growing coldness of the chandeliers. A lone spotlight illuminated the empty stage in the center of the hall. Conversation faltered, glasses lowered. A suffocating stillness spread. Then, a voice, sweet, calm, deadly. Chloe Summers' voice, crackling from the sound system. "Welcome, everyone, to the night of judgment." Sounding. Chloe's voice fell like a guillotine. No one moved. No one spoke. All eyes locked on the empty stage, bathed in stark white light. Then a beep. The giant screen behind the stage flickered to life. No grand tribute video, no congratulatory montage. Instead, a recording. First, the image of Chloe Summers, wine spilling down her arm. Richard Langston's distorted face mid-laughter, eyes gleaming with cruelty. Unedited, unfiltered, raw. The room held its breath. Someone muttered under their breath. Another gasped audibly. Faces paled. Champagne flutes slipped from trembling fingers. The next footage rolled. Chloe tripping the glint of a Gucci heel deliberately sticking out. The fall replayed in slow motion. An act of cruelty laid bare frame by frame. And over the images, a voice recording played. Maison must maintain its class. Trash like her cleaning toilets would still be too generous. Richard's voice, undeniable, irrefutable. Richard shot up from his chair, furious. This is fake. This is doctored, he roared, but no one moved to back him. The exits were blocked. Every waiter, every bartender tonight handpicked security, silent, immovable. No one left. No one entered. Only Chloe controlled the room now. The footage continued. Messages, emails, conspiracies. A network of betrayal carefully woven behind Chloe's back. Scene after scene exposed the ugliness that had once hidden under Maison's glittering surface. The temperature in the room plummeted. Whispers twisted into choked sobs. Those who once wore smug smiles now huddled in their seats, trembling under the crushing weight of their unveiled sins. And through it all, Chloe stood in the shadows, silent, immovable, waiting. From the end of the hall, a figure stepped forward, her silhouette sharp against the pallid, trembling crowd. Dressed simply in black, head held high, Chloe Summers, alive, unbroken, and here not to plead, but to judge. Maison Etoile was frozen in suffocating silence. Every eye in the hall locked onto the figure stepping onto the stage. Chloe Summers, no longer the trembling waitress, no longer the easy target, but the judge, the executioner. A microphone clicked on. Its hum vibrated against the marbled silence. Chloe raised it to her lips. Her eyes swept over the sea of faces, pale, trembling, desperate. And she spoke. Her voice was calm, cold, inescapable. Tonight, Chloe said, there are no waiters, no distinguished guests, no excuses. She paused, letting the words carve deep into the bone. Tonight, she continued, there is only a trial. Someone shifted nervously. Someone else bolted from their seat, but was stopped cold by a silent guard blocking the exit. No one could leave. No one could hide. They were trapped not by force, but by the truths they had thought they buried. Chloe lifted her hand. The screen behind her flickered again. New words appeared in bold, stark font. List of defendants. The hall rippled with horror. Each heart thudded violently against fragile ribs. And the first name appeared in blood-red letters. Richard Langston. Chloe turned her gaze on him. Richard, the man who had laughed as she was humiliated, who had poured wine down her sleeve, who had orchestrated her fall. No rage burned in Chloe's eyes. Only a pitiless calm. She spoke. Richard Langston, first defendant. Charges, psychological humiliation, incitement of abuse, conspiracy to publicly degrade. Richard staggered to his feet. You're insane, he shouted. This isn't legal. You have no authority. His voice cracked with panic, but it didn't matter. Maison's old rules no longer applied. Here under this light, before these witnesses, truth was the only law. Chloe said nothing. She simply pressed a button. The next clip rolled. Richard, laughing. Richard, raising his glass to a toast over Chloe's fallen body. Richard, mocking the dignity he had stolen from others for sport. Each moment stabbed into the gasping silence. Richard tried to protest, tried to shout over the footage, but the images spoke louder, and no one, not even his oldest allies, dared meet his eyes anymore. Chloe took another step forward, her shadow stretching long across the white marble, her voice low but cutting. No one framed you. Richard Langston, you built your disgrace with your own hands. A glass shattered somewhere behind him. Richard collapsed into his chair, defeated, humiliated, broken, and Chloe simply turned her gaze back to the screen. A new name was already appearing. The next defendant, the next betrayal, the next judgment. Richard Langston's collapse rippled through the hall like a crack in a frozen lake. Everyone saw it. The self-proclaimed king of tech, now a shivering wreck slumped in his chair. No power, no allies, no escape. But Chloe wasn't finished. She pressed the button again, and the evidence poured out. Secret emails detailing how Richard and his circle planned Chloe's downfall. Whispered conversations, recorded by hidden microphones, dripping with contempt. Deals made in back rooms to crush those deemed unworthy. One after another. Each lie stripped bare. One after another. Each mask ripped away. Richard stood again, stumbling, furious. This isn't fair. It's a setup. But the words tasted bitter even to him. No one moved to support him. No one spoke on his behalf. He was alone now, utterly, irrevocably alone. The screen continued. More footage, more betrayals. A mosaic of corruption stitched together by arrogance and cruelty. And Richard's name sat at the center, no longer a badge of honor, but a brand of shame. He tried to bolt toward the exit, but the doors remained locked. The guards remained silent. The judgment remained. Finally, Richard sank back into his chair, head bowed. A man not destroyed by fists, but by the truth, by the inescapable weight of his own sins. On the screen, the next name appeared in burning letters. Elena Marlowe. The room stilled again. All eyes turned toward the small, shaking figure near the staircase. The net was tightening. The reckoning was far from over. The name Elena Marlowe glowed in bold letters across the giant screen. A spotlight fell upon the small, shivering figure by the staircase. Elena shrank back instinctively, pressing herself against the cold marble column. Her once innocent face twisted with panic and desperation. Chloe Summers stood on the stage, expressionless. Her eyes locked onto Elena sharp, unwavering. There was no anger, no pity, only cold, relentless clarity. The screen shifted again. Security footage appeared. Elena, in the break room, hurriedly texting moments after approaching Reyes Chloe right after offering her help. The message appeared on screen, magnified for all to see. The prey has taken the bait. Next step. The words were clinical, calculated. Betrayal captured in black and white. A gasp rippled through the hall. Elena collapsed onto her knees, her sobs echoing against the high walls. "Chloe!" she wailed, crawling toward the stage on all fours, hands trembling. Tears streamed down her face, smudging her makeup into a grotesque mask. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. They forced me. I had no choice." Her voice cracked under the weight of terror. Elena clasped her hands together, as if praying. "Please, Chloe, please, I didn't want to hurt you." Chloe stood still, immovable. Her gaze never wavered. She lowered the microphone slowly to her lips and spoke. "No one forced you to betray me. You made your choice." Elena sobbed louder, dragging herself forward, reaching out a trembling hand as if trying to grasp Chloe's mercy. But Chloe took a step back, a clean, decisive motion. No hatred, no forgiveness, only separation. A final severing of all ties. Elena crumpled onto the cold marble floor. Her sobs, desperate and hollow, filled the room, a symphony of regret no one wanted to hear. Chloe turned away from her, lifted her head, and raised her hand once more. The screen lit up again. New names appeared. Dozens. A roll call of complicity and cowardice. The trial wasn't over. It had only just begun. The hall was drowning in silence thick as tar. On the screen, one name after another burned into existence. Each name a blade, each accusation a blow. Chloe's voice remained steady, unforgiving, unrelenting. Alexander Pierce, Human Resources Manager. Charges covering up abuse, concealing evidence. The man in the corner turned pale, shrinking into his seat. Marianne Duval, head of VIP Relations. Charges co-conspirator in employee humiliation. I think I'll come and charge to her open. The elegant woman in the silk dropped her glass, shattering it at her feet. Jonathan Reyes, executive chef. Charges silence in the face of violence. Clips rolled, emails surfaced. Every lie, every cover-up, every sneer, all displayed under the merciless white light. No room for denial, no space for pride. Panic spread like wildfire. Some tried to inch toward the exits only to be stopped by the silent sentinels at every door. Some wept, some collapsed into their chairs, too numb to fight. Their empire of glass was crumbling around them, and all they could do was watch. Chloe continued, name after name, sin after sin, each one laid bare, each mask peeled away, until there was nothing left but their true selves, ugly, desperate, broken. Maison Etoile, once the beacon of luxury, now resembled nothing more than a graveyard for dreams built on cruelty. And Chloe Summers stood in the center of it all, calm, resolute, not savoring revenge, simply delivering justice. At last, Chloe lowered the microphone. She stepped back from the stage. Her voice, soft but cutting, echoed in the frozen hall. This trial is over. The judgment will not come from me. It will come from yourselves. The light dimmed. A heavy, deathly silence settled over the room. In that silence, their real punishment began. The guilt, the shame, the slow, agonizing realization. They had destroyed themselves long before Chloe ever lifted a finger. The grand hall of Maison Etoile was heavy with silence. No music, no laughter, just broken pride and crumbling illusions scattered across the marble floor like fallen autumn leaves. Chloe Summers stood alone amidst the wreckage. She had no sword, no gallows, no need for bloodshed. Truth had been enough. Their own actions had built the noose. Their own arrogance had pulled it tight. She raised the microphone one last time. Her voice, steady and unwavering, filled the shattered space. I did not destroy Maison Etoile. You did. She looked out over the sea of ruined faces. The once mighty, now nothing more than hollow shells. Her voice sharpened, slicing through the room like ice. And I will not end you tonight, Ma. Your greed, your pride, your cruelty. They will do it for me. Somewhere, a chair toppled over with a hollow crash. Someone sobbed, choking back regret and shame. The mighty had fallen not with a roar, but with a whimper. Chloe didn't flinch. She didn't revel in it. She simply watched as they crumbled under the weight of what they had done. She lowered the microphone onto the stage. The final sound, a quiet thunk, reverberated in the vastness. Then she turned and walked away. Each footstep echoed like a slow, deliberate drumbeat against the marble. No one called her back. No one dared. The door swung open before her. Cold night air rushed into the suffocating hall. She stepped through without hesitation. Without looking back, Maison Etoile had burned itself to ash. And Chloe Summers, she was already walking towards something new. The wind whipped against Chloe's face as she stepped into the night. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, but not from the cold. The chill she had felt inside Maison Etoile had been far colder. Behind her, the once magnificent building still glowed, an empty, hollow corpse dressed in gold, a monument to vanity and aim. What case? Vanity and decay. A coffin dressed up for a final parade. Chloe paused on the stone steps. She turned back, not with longing, not with regret, but with quiet finality. She watched the windows, the flickering lights, the trembling figures inside, trapped in the ruins of their own making. There would be no salvation for them here, only slow decay, a fitting end for a place that had once demanded worship at the altar of power. She drew a deep breath. The crisp air filled her lungs, sharp and clean. And then Chloe smiled, not with bitterness, not with triumph, but with peace. Maison Etoile had demanded obedience. It had crushed the weak. It had worshipped the cruel. And now it was nothing more than dust pretending to be gold. Chloe turned her back on it. Her heels clicked softly against the pavement as she walked away, each step carrying her farther from the ashes of what once was, each step towards something new, towards something real, toward the life she would build not on the suffering of others, but on kindness, strength, and truth. Behind her, Maison still glowed against the Manhattan night, but it was only the glow of a dying star, already forgotten, already irrelevant. And Chloe Summers, she was just beginning. Time passed. Days after the night of judgment, Maison Etoile became the subject of every whisper across Manhattan. Newspapers screamed headlines. The fall of Maison Etoile scandal erupts behind golden curtains. From glory to ashes, a collapse no one saw coming. The once bright facade of Maison was now draped in heavy, dust-covered tarps. The grand sign, once gleaming with pride, stood abandoned, weathered, forgotten, shivering under winter rains. The city had turned its back. The city had moved on. In a small, hidden cafe tucked into a quiet street corner, Chloe Summers sat alone by the window. The tables were old wood, scratched with stories. The scent of fresh baked bread and strong coffee warmed the air. Before her lay a battered leather notebook, the edges of its pages frayed from years of silent hope. A pen rested lightly in her fingers. For the first time in so long, Chloe wasn't writing to survive. She was writing to dream, and the words came steady, sure, each letter carved not in desperation, but in certainty. She wrote, Maison Etoile reborn, a place where no power is needed to be respected, a place where every drop of sweat is honored, a place where every soul, no matter how small, is truly seen. Not glittering, not hollow, just real, just human. A place where people wouldn't be trophies, but family. Chloe leaned back in her chair. Sunlight slanted through the window, catching the edges of her hair, warming her skin. She closed her eyes briefly, letting the light soak into her, into the scars, into the hope. She pressed the notebook to her chest, and when she stepped back out into the brisk Manhattan streets, disappearing into the swirl of life and noise, Chloe knew Maison Etoile had died. But something better was breathing now. Something that would grow, something that would live. And this time, she would build it her way. Part 18. From Ruins to Rebirth, 1 month later. Chloe Summers returned to Maison Etoile, or rather, to what remained. No grand chandeliers, no sweet violin music, only dust, only echoes. The grand marble halls were empty now, the scent of mold creeping into every cracked wall. Broken tables lay discarded. Fallen curtains drooped like dead flags. She stepped into the center of the ruined lobby, the very spot where power had once paraded itself like a peacock. Now only silence reigned. Chloe placed her hand on the cold marble of the bar. It was smooth, polished, on the surface, perfect. But inside, she knew it had long since rotted. Just like the world Maison had built, a smile touched her lips. Not a bitter smile, but one of peace, because Chloe understood now. Before you can build something true, you must tear down the lies. She rolled up her sleeves and began. She tore down the heavy velvet curtains, letting sunlight flood into the dusty halls. She dismantled the gaudy crystal chandeliers, hung instead warm, simple lights that scattered cozy, golden pools. She replaced the gilded menus with chalkboards. Here, you don't need power, only kindness. She assembled a new team. Not the most glamorous, not the most polished, but the kindest young chefs who had been told they were too rough around the edges, servers who knew what it was to be invisible, people who would treat every guest like a human being, not a stepping stone. Day by day, brick by brick, Maison Etoile was reborn. No longer a palace of cruelty, but a hearth, a home. One evening, Chloe stood in the center of the renovated lobby. Sunlight painted warm stripes across the new wood floors. The scent of fresh bread and roasted coffee filled the air. Laughter rang from the kitchen. Genuine, unforced. Chloe closed her eyes for a moment, breathed it all in, and smiled, truly smiled. The Maison of old had fallen, but from its ashes something stronger had grown, something real. And now, the doors were ready to open. Autumn afternoon. Golden leaves blanketed the walkway leading to the new Maison Etoile. Above the modest wooden door, a small hand-painted sign swayed gently in the breeze. A place where every heart is welcome. No dazzling crystal chandeliers, no velvet ropes, just the scent of warm bread, fresh coffee, and the gentle strumming of an acoustic guitar somewhere inside. The front door chimed softly as it opened. Chloe Summers looked up from the bar and saw him, Richard Langston, no longer draped in expensive suits, no longer wearing the smug grin of old. Instead, a man with hollow cheeks, shaky hands, and eyes clouded with hesitation. He stood there awkwardly, unsure, small, lost. After a long pause, Richard's voice, hoarse and fragile, broke the silence. Could I, have a table? Gone was the arrogance. Gone was the entitlement. All that remained was a man stripped bare by his own sins. Chloe gently set down her cup. She stepped out from behind the bar, faced him directly. The man who once spilled wine down her sleeve like she was trash. The man who laughed at her fall. Her heart didn't race. Her hands didn't shake. There was no anger left, only understanding, only calm. She smiled, a real smile, warm, forgiving. Here, everyone is welcome, Chloe said softly. Richard nodded once. The movement was almost imperceptible, but full of gratitude. He stepped inside, joining the quiet murmur of conversation, the easy laughter, the shared warmth. In this maison, there were no kings, no victims, only people. Chloe returned to her place behind the bar. She looked out over the room, a patchwork of humanity, flawed and beautiful. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself a deep, contented breath. Maison Etoile was alive again. And so was she. Night fell over Manhattan. Beyond the glass windows, the city buzzed and blazed with life. Inside Maison Etoile, the lights glowed soft and golden. No chandeliers, no spotlights, just simple lamps and warm laughter. The scent of cinnamon and roasted coffee drifted lazily through the air. Chloe Summers sat alone at a small table by the window, a cup of black coffee cradled in her hands. She leaned back, her head resting lightly against the worn wood of the chair, watching the world outside. Pedestrians hurried past, taxi horns blared in the distance. Life moved on unconcerned, unstoppable, and for once, Chloe didn't feel the need to catch up. She was exactly where she needed to be, inside Maison. The atmosphere pulsed with a quiet, steady heartbeat. Chefs bantered in the kitchen. Guests chuckled over shared desserts. There were no rankings here, no thrones to kneel before. Only humanity. Messy, beautiful, alive. Chloe sipped her coffee. Bitter, rich, perfect. Like life itself, not always sweet, not always easy, but deeply, undeniably real. Outside, A gust of wind sent golden leaves swirling past the window. Chloe smiled, not a smile of victory, not a smile of defiance, science, but a smile of peace. Bah, my peace. The kind that only comes when you've weathered the worst storms and emerged whole. Maison Etoile was no longer a temple to vanity. It was a home, a sanctuary, a testament to the idea that kindness could survive even the fiercest cruelty. Chloe knew this wasn't an ending. This was just the beginning. A new chapter, a new life, and she was ready.